Good evening and welcome everyone to www.jedischool.science. I know I may look like Dan Winter from fractalu.com, but this is an illusion. I'm actually Yoda. Yoda. May the force be with you, Luke. So we're here tonight to talk to all you Jedi Knights about the real science of Jedi School and how to be a real Jedi using real physics and real empowerment. This is an amazing mission tonight, and we have a secret mission for all of you, which we're going to tell you about in one moment. So the new JediSchool.science is brought to you from fractalu.com and fractalfield.com. And we're going to be telling you about the real Force Awakens, the real Jedi physics. This is Captain's Log Supplemental, September 16, 2018, Stardate prequel. And we're going to be talking about Anu Nakin, Jedi physics, and how Roddenberry learned about Orion Wars history from Phyllis Schlemmer there in UK, and the Andromeda material and the real galactic history story is all part of our Jedi science introduction this evening. So our previous websites, as you know, about the Force, the plasma, are therify.net, fractalu.com, and fractalfield.com. And it's all about that inner flame that makes the Force be with you. So before we talk about what is a real Jedi, I need to explain your secret mission this evening. This is the secret mission. We're gathered here in this underground grotto together with all you Jedi Knights. Our location in secret is called Neterin. Neterin comes from the Egyptian Nedir, which means the deep and the secret. But Neterin also is net her in, which is what happens when you get in a place where the charge lines are fractal and implode, and they support the plasma called the Force be with you. So we always meet in Neterin, and note that if you put in a mirror conjugate image internet, you have net her in, which is what we're doing this evening. So welcome to Neterin, and here is your secret mission. All you Stardate warriors need to do something very important, which is you need to infiltrate the headquarters, the administration of Walt Disney World, where they're installing the largest addition to Disney World in history, which is the Star Wars edition for Luke Skywalker and May the Force be with you. And what you need to convince them by infiltrating their administration with emails and with phone calls and with convincing them is that they need to save the world by installing at the new Star Wars Central at Disney World a new secret school for science, for real Jedi science, for real Jedi warriors, so they can save the world with you. And the reason that will save the world, we're going to explain with the curriculum right now, which is to be presented in the JediSchool.science at Disney World, which you need to convince them. And the reason that that is going to save the world, as you're going to see in a minute, is because if enough Jedi warriors are trained, they can steer the tornado of the solar wind, which is coming to steer the tornado. And there is another part of that story, which has to do with galactic history and the arrival of what was called the Empire Strikes Back, but is really the Amasutum. And you, if you're a Jedi warrior and can project your plasma, then you can solve the problem of the Empire Strikes Back and save the day for the Galactic Federation. And we're going to explain that history and the history of the Death Star, the real Death Star, which, by the way, is the moon. Don't tell anyone. And we're going to explain that history in just one moment. So the curriculum you're about to see is what is to be presented at the JediSchool.science at Disney World, and your mission is to convince Disney World that they will save the world if they create the new school for Jedi warriors. Isn't that fun? So the point is now is to understand what is to be presented at the JediSchool.science at Disney World, which will include a virtual reality training for Stargate warriors, which includes mind control, mind plasma projection training called Flame in Mind, which you are to see in about a minute, what is to be presented, how the new Jedi warriors are to be taught at the Jedi School.science. So that was our intro. Now you understand our secret mission. Now we begin the actual curriculum, which is to be taught at the new secret Jedi school in Neterin. So first, what is a Jedi? Well, the original term Djed came from the raising of the Djed in Egypt, which, as you see depicted here, was called a Djed tower. And it happened that the supports on this tower, you can see it here, and you can also see it here, this Djed tower that supports the Egyptian light bulbs, which we now know are the plasma projectors, which creates Therify.net, which creates rejuvenation and Jedi warriors. So these Djed towers had a geometry based on golden ratio, which made them capacitively implosive, which is to say plasma projective. Now, what do we mean when we say to project the plasma? That requires that we understand what we mean when we say, may the force be with you. What is the force? So the force is actually the plasma. It is the charge. And so then you say, well, what is charge? Which is the question the world's most famous physicist, Elizabeth Rauscher, asked me because she didn't know. Charge is actually the compression and rarefaction of the universal superfluid of the ether, plus and minus charge. And when that charge rotates, it stores inertia named mass. And when that charge rotates, it has a period named time. So actually, you don't bend space-time. More accurately, you bend the path of charge. And later we're going to see that's named warp, as in warp propulsion, which we're about to explain in a moment. But the other thing you need to know about the plasma, which is behind the concept of the force be with you, is that all of physics is totally clear that 99.999% of the universe is made of only plasma. What is plasma? A cloud of charge. Well, how does that become the force? Well, first of all, if only 0.001% of the universe is made of something besides charge, plasma, when charge rotates, it stores inertia, and that's called mass. So physics thinks that's separate, but guess what mass is made of? Charge. Guess what time is made of? Charge rotating. So hello, that's the force. The force is when that charge becomes plasma projective. But this is the key difference, that there are very special environments which allow that plasma or charge to become self-aware. And when the charge or plasma is self-aware, it's called the force. So where can that charge be self-aware if what you have here is charge and plasma, what you have there is charge and plasma, and the universe is made of nothing else but charge and plasma? What differentiates when that charge or plasma becomes self-aware and therefore the force? What differentiates this property that emerges when the plasma becomes self-aware is called embedding or embeddability. In physics these days, this is called perfect nesting, or entanglement is a sexy term. But it happens that the little charged donut, you see, when charge or plasma travels, it always travels as a torus, as a donut, as in the Torah. It's a toroidal Torah. And so when the plasma, all the universe plasma travel is only enabled when it becomes a donut. It's the same physics of why when you're a smoker, there's nothing else you can make as a smoker but smoke rings. Nothing else works. Why? Because it's self-aware. I mean, it's non-destructively self-reentrant and therefore self-aware. So when the little donut nests in the big donut recursively by golden mean ratio, then it starts to implode. And the name for that principle is called conjugation of phases, or phase conjugate, because when you add and multiply recursively, you conjugate, just like what happens when you get married and you conjugate the DNA, it adds and multiplies recursively. And implosion results, hopefully, and that fusion is shaped like a Valentine, which is two golden spirals. So you now are beginning to understand that there's certain physics which tells you when the force can be with you and when it can't. And this is a very important concept which relates to something called the capacitance, or the ability to breathe charge. And the ability to efficiently breathe charge in and out of environments is measured by something in Jedi science named dielectric constant. And dielectric constant simply means how efficient can the capacitor or the charge bell ring like a bell. And it happens that biologic materials allow that charge to resonate efficiently and have a high dielectric constant. And that means your aura can breathe. And when your aura can breathe in and out, it enables the force to be with you. So the practical expression of this is, for example, if you've ever seen photographs of those orbs, those living plasma balls, or ball lightning, they show up where biological materials are present, but they will never show up in a steel or aluminum building with lots of electrosmog, because the charge is prevented from distributing efficiently. The dielectric constant is wrong. That's why living materials with living architecture are essential for the distribution of the force be with you. So the same is true of ghosts and plasma projection and remote viewing and all the good stuff. So to find environments that allow discharge to distribute efficiently, or plasma, is the physics of how to learn to have the force be with you. So we're beginning to understand what is a Jedi. A Jedi is someone, oops, let's go back to this slide. A Jedi is someone who has learned to project plasma with their aura. Remember, your aura is also a cloud of charge. It's called cold plasma, which is because it doesn't require heat to excite the charge to rotate in this big donut. And cold plasma, cold atmospheric plasma, is famous in modern medicine for healing. And that's what our Therify.net does with cold plasma. And how you project charge or plasma with your aura determines whether you are a Jedi, a Jedi Knight and plasma projector. And this is indicated by ability to lucid dream, remote view, plasma project, and astral travel, because you can coherently project the center of the charge donut of your aura, and that becomes centripetal and allows you to steer tornadoes. And the ability to do that is identified in your brain waves, in your heart waves, and in your blood. And in your blood, it was called MicroChloridians in the blood for Anakin Skywalker. And the MicroChloridians is actually the implosion that happens in the DNA when it's braided by that charge implosion, which indicates your ability to be a Jedi Knight. Which we're going to show more pictures about in a moment. But the thing we're going to explain right now from Jedi physics, we're going to pretend we don't know the difference between Star Wars and Star Trek. And we're going to talk about the definition of warp propulsion versus impulse propulsion, because Jedi Knights actually project their aura, their plasma, to become ability to project your aura, which is, by the way, how you die successfully, which is how we're going to end this presentation. The Jedi Knights project their aura by something called phase conjugate charge implosion, which simply means the ability to implode charge, and from the center of implosion comes non-destructive or ordered explosion or radiance or charge projection called the Jedi Tower, Mygdal, which is the Jedi. The definition of being a Jedi Knight is the ability to plasma project that way. So, in order to understand that physics for good Jedi school.science Jedi Knights, we're going to use very practical examples that you can study in the literature and learn the physics of real plasma projection, which is real plasma propulsion, which, by the way, replaces every form of transportation on the planet and explains what Einstein, Stephen Hawking, and NASA didn't know, which is why objects fall to the ground, which you need to know in order to be a Jedi Knight. Isn't it cool? So this is the physics of warp drive. Now, remember, we said that when you warp space, you're not actually warping what's called time-space. Einstein's term in that sense is a bit misleading. The only thing you're warping is the trajectory of a compression wave of charge. But when you do that, you affect both the rate at which the charge rotates, which is the only definition of time, and the rate of charge rotation defines also the only definition of mass. So calling that space-time is actually misleading because it's only charge rotation. So how do you warp space-time, which is to say warp charge trajectories, to produce propulsion? And for this, we're going to use two examples. This is now from the detailed physics literature at fractalfield.com/propulsion. Now that link at the top should not be fractalfield.com.propulsion. The correct link is fractalfield.com/propulsion. I'll put it in the chat window too. Because you can see both of these propulsion examples, warp drive and impulse power there, in detail with physics examples. So first we're going to do the warp drive. So the warp drive example is something that's called the Koski-Frost experiments, which it appears the U.S. government tried to hide after it was widely published and it was removed from every university library in the country, apparently by the military trying to hide this. But in fact, the Koski-Frost experiment is well documented. It was a quartz crystal cube that produced 800 times its own weight in gravity when you put a phase conjugate pump wave on two sides of the quartz crystal cube. It would change size, literally expand, and then it would float. Remember how they called that unobtainium floating in Avatar? Let's see, we have a microphone here that we might just mute. 1 second. Yes, we muted the other microphone, so we have quiet here. Sorry. So the reason it floats is because the quartz crystal cube is helical on the z-axis. It's a slinky. I just happen to have my slightly damaged slinky here. So the z-axis, the long axis of the quartz crystal, is a helix. It's a slinky, just like DNA, and that makes it piezoelectric. And so if you pump that, the phase conjugate implosive capacitance here allows that helix of charge to implode and suck in more charge centripetally, producing propulsion. And you will see that more graphically when we talk in the next slide about the definition of impulse power as differentiated from warp drive. So there are many examples of using a crystal for propulsion. For example, in Star Trek, I believe they called them dilithium crystals. Actually, the correct term would be lithium niobate, which are a phase conjugate dielectric. Phase conjugate dielectric means the capacitance is so efficient that this capacitor is ringing like a bell infinitely, so it actually implodes charge from the plenum, from the vacuum, and so a dielectric constant that's high enough is a 0-point energy vacuum coherence charge source energy source device, 0-point energy, quote unquote, free energy, by definition, if the dielectric constant is high enough. So I urge you to learn what is meant by dielectric constant. Then you will know what the dilithium crystals in the warp drive did and how propulsion works. Now you say, well, is this getting to be a little abstract physics? No. I'm about to explain to you how you're going to do propulsion with your aura when you're a Jedi Knight, which is the only way to steer when you lucid dream, astral project, and when you die. Because you are then a plasma ball, a plasma torus, and there's a navigation device built into every plasma torus because it self-organizes with a spiral on the torus. And if you set the direction of that spiral on the torus in the correct index angle, you choose the direction of propulsion vectoring. And the shadows of that spiral on that torus index what angle it's pointing at accurately. And if you set the index of those spiral shadows, you have Hebrew and Sanskrit, which are more than just plasma donuts. They are propulsion vectors. That's how you steer, by focusing on the right spiral on the torus. We'll see more animations about that later. So that introduces the concept of impulse power. Impulse power was how the famous Vimana flew in the Vedas, and then the Nazis took some of that technology, and it was called the Nazi bell. Basically, what you do is you pump a high inertial fluid on an accurate trajectory on the spiral on the donut. And the high-level engineers and mathematicians at implosiongroup.com, our technology group, have the equations to optimize to create maximum propulsion with the correct angle of the spiral on the torus. So what happens exactly? How can you understand how that makes gravity? Because that spiral on the torus is what you visualize when you want to steer your own aura when you die. The shadow index of vector directions, which is called Hebrew and Sanskrit, the sacred alphabet letters, are actually plasma vortex vector direction indices based on that spiral of the torus. So how does it work? Who done it? So actually what happens is that when inertia of simple liquid inertia, or even better, when magnetic inertia coupled with liquid inertia is pumped at high velocity accurately on that spiral on the torus. And we'd like to credit Elizabeth Donovan, Bill Donovan here for noticing that when hydraulic equipment pumps hydraulic fluid at high inertia in a spiral on the torus, the hydraulic machine jumps off the ground. Well, how are you making gravity? That's called impulse power. Well, the equations optimize how much gravity you make are as part of the technology group, implosiongroup.com, and it is about implosion. So when the liquid is following that trajectory of that spiral on the torus, what happens is as it goes from outside in to inside out perfectly, the golden spiral is called optimized translation of vorticity if you study golden spiral in the physics of hydrodynamics for Jedi school. That what's translated in vorticity is the rotational inertia this way is translated non-destructively on the spiral path down through center into propulsion. And the amount of propulsion you make is dependent on idealizing the trajectory. And idealizing the trajectory is something that we have equations for. And in the Nazi bell, actually originally in the Vimana, it was mercury, which has, remember, high liquid inertia, plus there's a dopant agent, which is basically an iron powder with a certain wetting agent that turns it into the famous purple liquid they use for the Nazi bell. And when that is carrying high liquid hydraulic inertia plus high magnetic flux density inertia, along that trajectory accurately, a huge amount of charge implosion creates a huge amount of gravity. The thing that we must understand is that when you make these kinds of plasma fusion devices, it affects the local material called binding energy. And this is a very good lesson in Jedi School.Science. And I suggest you explain this to the engineer at your local nuclear power plant. Okay? Here's what you should explain to the engineer running your local nuclear power plant. What you should tell him is that when you create centripetal force constructively, the local binding energy increases. However, if you do it destructively, the local binding energy decreases, which literally means the atoms nearby fall apart. Oh, hello. In fact, the cement on the tower supporting the Nazi bell began to fall off because they affected the binding energy. It's literally the interstitial nuclear bond of every quantum Planck-related bond in the body is affected. And this is measurable. There are devices that measure. It's basically a nylon thread under pressure. And you can measure micro differences in the tension on this nylon thread, visualized like a guitar string, measuring these micro stresses. And when you measure that, if you take that device near a nuclear fission device, there is less binding energy and the thing starts to fall apart. Literally, every atom it's like the kids are unraveling their own nest. Whereas if you move that same device near a fusion device, you're creating net centripetal and therefore negentropic forces. The binding energy increases and it actually holds itself together better. And this affects every atom in your body. So hello, your nuclear power plant engineers desperately need to learn the definition of binding energy, and we're going to be publishing new papers on this physics. But in the meantime, I suggest you tell the fission plant engineers that they better go fishing for a way to find out how not to unravel every atomic bond in their neighborhood. So the net centripetal force is related to creating this propulsion device. So now we've explained a little bit about the difference between warp drive, which is, remember, the crystal imploding warping space, which is to bend the charge flow lines so they implode, and it's called warping space. But all you're doing actually is imploding the charge and making it centripetal, and you give it a path out through the speed of light at the center at the Planck thresholds. And we'll have a slide about that in a moment. Here we're just seeing more examples of propulsion from a spiral on the vortex. This is the famous Victor Schauberger repulsine, which creates a huge amount of gravitational propulsion, again, by a simple hydraulic inertia on an accurate spiral on a vortex. And that creates lift. And that was basically, as explained here, the Nazi bell and the Glocke. Is it safe to say symbols like Schwarz's sauna and the swastika represent centripetal force? Yes, in fact, we're going to see in our animations of the Grail there, goldenmean.info/Grail, that you see the shadow of the swastika, which is simply the side view of 4 golden spirals on a cone that create a swastika, and it's literally the shadow of perfect implosion. So this is just another slide. This is from our presentation for investors on the right here, and we have to acknowledge here, Martin, thank you, Martin, that our equations predict the right number and angle of the turns on the torus to actually create maximum charge implosion. It's called the wrapping factor on the torus, major radius, minor radius. You can see some of the equations. And those who are interested in being involved in our propulsion technologies, we have branches in Australia and in Canada and in Europe. So we're pretty global in that regard. So this is called translation of vorticity, and we use Navier-Stokes equations to predict these mathematically. And you see how that same spiral on a torus is how a tornado implodes at center and becomes self-aware and has an eye and is therefore navigable. And Jedi Knights must understand how to steer tornadoes by creating the center of low pressure in the center by plasma projecting, which is which is Jedi School.Science 101. So we must understand the steering of tornadoes. And the archetype of that perfect spiral on the torus you see on top is actually called Anu, as in Anu, the sun god, which is the shape of this vortex spiral that the Theosophes and clairvoyants saw in the heart of the sun, called Anu, which later became the word Anunnaki, which actually was, they were wannabes because they wanted to be sun gods. So if you want to be an Anu, you have to have a plasma, the geometry of the heart of the sun, called Anu. However, the Anunnaki had a few problems, which we're about to talk about. So if you take the angle of the spiral on the torus, you see here, and you see the 7 layers of human heart muscle are precisely layered in the 7 axial tilt angles of the 7 symmetry spins of the tetrahedron, meaning you could not get a better squeeze. And that's the 7 spins outside, and the 5 spins inside are obviously the pent. So you have the pent implosive dodeca symmetry slip knotted inside the tetracubic. And when you complete the tetracube inside the dodeca, you have charge implosion, which I just happen to have the Star Mother kit. Now, this Star Mother actually relates to the concept of Amu Sutum, the mother of stars, and we're going to talk about the history of the Amu Sutum. But this is this tetracube in the center and the dodeca-icosa infinite stellation called the mother of stars, Star Mother, which I later proved is the geometry of hydrogen. The kit's available at goldenmean.info/kit, and the physics is at fractalfield.com/physics. Okay. So this is the real grail. You see that if you rotate that, that's how you make that shadow of the swastika, actually. And that plasma donut there, let's see back here. This is plasma projection, Egyptian style. These aren't light bulbs. These are plasma projectors, which are a form of Djed tower, which later becomes Therify.net, where we use this high voltage insulator here and project the waveform frequency signature, which looks like a caduceus, which you can see here in the plasma Pyrex tubes of therapy.net. And this creates a time-reversing rejuvenation phase conjugate field in broad spectral plasma, which is negentropic centripetal, and a cool light at center, which is time-reversing in the sense of rejuvenation or neg entropy. Remember, in physics, when they first discovered phase conjugate optics and made time reversal, the only thing they meant was neg entropy. The only thing they did was return to increased order. You can never go back in time to less order, only to increased order. So that we've applied to the cold plasma in therapy.net. So this is just a reminder that the physics of fractality, which is how the force can be with you, is based on golden mean ratio. Here's the famous Mandelbrot fractal, and these are powers of golden mean, phi to the third power and phi to the sixth power in the shadow of the Mandelbrot fractal, which is actually a shadow of the pentadodecastellation you see here. And this is when we rotate this, and this you can see at goldenmean.info/grail in 3D rotating. We didn't put it on the screen right here because of the bandwidth limitations of learnitlive.com. When you rotate the Grail animation, goldenmean.info/grail, you will see a swastika there, which is basically about charge implosion, which is how the force is with you. So Jedi Knights need to understand the plasma physics of how you conjugate. And this is called the sacred four directions in ancient spiritual science. But in physics, it's called four-wave mixing. And this is the way you cause lasers to converge to create neg entropy, self-organization, and time reversal in phase conjugate optics. And this is also how Agnihotra works, that exactly at the time of sunrise and sunset, the plasma vectors get this four-wave mixing going, which is the sacred four directions, and that allows them to conjugate at center and accelerate that charge through the speed of light at the Planck threshold, right at the center. And that accelerating charge out through the speed of light, exhaust of charge through Planck, through the speed of light by golden ratio times the speed of light at the Planck threshold into longitudinal electromagnetics is the cause of gravity and all neg entropy and all centripetal forces. We have more graphs about how that works coming up here in JediSchool.science. So we see the Grail cup in there, and this is, you're going to see more about the Caduceus cascade, and this makes a flame in the middle called the flame in mind. Welcome, Michael. Hi. And the flame in mind actually is this plasma flame you generate when you implode your brainwaves, which is how we train Jedi Knights at JediSchool.science with flameinmind.com, which we are about to install at the JediSchool.science at Disney World, because you're going to infiltrate Disney World and tell them we're going to save the world if we do it. And these animations are all at fractalfield.com and goldenmean.info. This is the perfect implosion. You see that in the geometry of the dodecaecosahedral infinite stellation, you can do infinite non-destructive compression, which was Einstein's definition of gravity, which we now know is infinite charge compression. And when you stick the straw here in the soap bubble can change scale without changing ratio, which is called perfected scale invariance, which is the key to perfected self-embedding, which is the key to perfecting entanglement, which is the key to perfecting all quantum mechanics, which is the key to gravity. So we are about to introduce how we apply this science to your brainwaves in your training to be a Jedi Knight. And just so you understand that wave shape that you will be creating inside your own brainwaves and heart at the moment you become plasma projective, called flameinmind.com. Just want to show you how you generate that wave shape. If you take the golden mean, 0.618, and you add and multiply recursively, called conjugating, you can add any two numbers, 0.618 and 1, to get the following number, 1.618, and then 2.618, and this sequence goes on forever. But you can add any two to get the following, or you can multiply any number in that series times 1.618 to get the next number. That's called arithmetic and geometric progression. For example, 1.618 squared is 2.618. So not only that is the definition of beauty, it's the definition of all implosive centripetal and fusion and negentropic forces. It's actually the only way through the speed of light, which is the only way out of here. Einstein said the speed of light was a dead end. He was actually wrong. It's actually fatal if you do not go through the speed of light. and we will explain more in a minute. So there's the wave shape called the caduceus, the hermetic secret. Now we want to apply that to Jedi training. So if you take that equation, which is my new equation for the origin of biologic negentropy, the title of my book at fractalfield.com, which is Planck length and time. Remember, if you take every wave that physics has ever measured, it divides evenly into only one wavelength. It's called Planck length and time, which is the undisputed musical key signature of all of physics. And that's true 1,000 light years in all directions. It's the same Planck length and time. So we have a very specific music which has defined all of the universe. It is Planck. Now you take that number and multiply it by exact powers of golden ratio, exact, called integer exponents, and you get a wave shape, which you will see in a minute, predicts all of the negentropic self-organizing variables like negentropy, the orbital diameter of Venus and Earth, and orbital times, and galactic year, precessional year, the photosynthesis. All these things drop out of that equation, the radii of hydrogen, fusion dynamics, perfect implosion, everything negentropic, Schumann harmonics, brainwave harmonics, drops out of that simple equation, Planck times powers of golden ratio, which is my discovery of the origin of biologic negentropy. So that predicts a certain series of frequencies, which happen to be these numbers, 2.78, 4.5, 7.29, 11.81, and 19.09 hertz, which turn out to be, that infinite harmonic series, look like a caduceus, per phase conjugation. That turns out to be very close to the actual known and published harmonics of the Schumann resonance of the Earth, how Gaia became self-organizing. That's new information. You know, Lovelock proved that Gaia is self-organizing, negentropic. He did not have a clue to how. I have answered that question. This is how. You take the harmonics of the known harmonics of the Schumann series, and it almost perfectly fits the measured harmonics of the Schumann series, 3 hertz, 7.83, 14.3, and 20.8 hertz. These are the known and published global harmonics of the Schumann resonance harmonic series, which C is very, very close to my equation. And the fun part for Jedi Knights here is what and how you do that in your brain waves to create bliss, peak perception, ecstasy, and plasma projection, the definition of being a Jedi. And this is how you do it. You make those frequencies in your heart and your brain waves. And in the virtual reality, what do they call it? What do they call it? The holodeck. Yes, in the holodeck on the Star Wars trainer for Jedi Knights that you will be helping us install at Disney World, there will be a system where you can do this with your brainwaves and learn how to plasma project, which is how the guild navigators in Dune steered in time. And we're about to see that. So these are brainwave harmonics, alpha, beta here, from the original Bliss tuner, which you will now see becomes our flameinmind.com. Alpha, beta, delta. These harmonics are in golden ratio, exactly fitting this equation, making this implosive caduceus called flameinmind.com. Remember, you are not a Bon Po warrior. You're not a Cherokee warrior until you can light a flame with your mind. And when Ingo Swann repeatedly in the laboratory lit that flame, I mean that thermistor heated at a distance with his mind through a Faraday gauge repeatedly, and it was measured, he proved you can light a flameinmind.com. And we now have proved what the brainwave signatures are to make that teachable, optimized by simple physics of making a flameinmind.com. So this is the virtual reality screen that will be animated with your actual brainwaves inside the holodeck in the trainer for Jedi School.Science that you will be installing with me at Disney World when you convince them that this will save the world. This is what the virtual reality trainer is going to look like. You see, what happens is you have something called in the flow. Now, the new flameinmind.com device, and you're going to see the transducer here in a moment. Let's see if I have it right here. It's very simple. The transducer is easier to put on than sunglasses. And the thing is cool, is a full 4-channel front brain versus rear brain EEG brainwave device, but it's easier than sunglasses. And the cool thing is, so you can check to see whether your front brain or your back brain is imploding. And the cool thing is that if your front brain is following your back brain and your back brain is dominant, we now know by extensive physics literature published in the sports medicine that if you want to be in the flow is actually a documented phenomenon where the rear brain, the back brain, called the reptilian brainstem. The Anunnaki return. It's the reptilian brainstem. No, it's the amygdala. No, it's the mouth of the snake brain. No, it's in the flow. The reason why the rear brain dominance enables you to be in the flow in, say, sports or when you're a Jedi and you must react instantly, so fast. The reason why rear brain dominance is so essential to this ability to be in the flow and able to relax and react instinctively in microseconds is because the nervous mediation wiring at the back brain goes directly from stimulus to response without any mediation at the front brain. So the back brain allows instinctive and instant response. It's the base brain, it's the reptilian brain stem, it's the early brain, it's the fast brain. Whereas if the signal processing has to go up to the front brain and get imploded and analyzed and resynthesized and then sent back, it takes much longer and you cannot then be in the flow. And the sports medicine has extensively documented this and measured it. It's absolutely true that when you teach your back brain to be dominant, it allows you to be in the flow so the force can be with you. And this is the new capability, which is now teachable with the new version 4-channel EEG of flameinmind.com, which is the subject of the fractalu.com course with Patrick Botti exactly 2 weeks from today at the end of September. So as you're looking at your virtual reality screen on the holodeck in the Jedi School.Science trainer that we are installing at Disney World because you're going to infiltrate them and tell them they have to in order to save the world, this is what the screen's going to look like. There's an eyeball. Now, I couldn't show you this eyeball moving right here, but it actually moves interactively, real time, on your virtual reality holodeck screen as we measure your brain waves. And what does the eyeball show? The eyeball shows when you're getting in the flow, because the eyeball opens and focuses and gets centered, and you can see exactly when the brain is imploding. So here on the left, this is me having a very definite bliss experience. Look at this, is the theta in this yellow peak here at about 4.4 hertz. This is such strong theta dominance here. You know, when the people talk about theta healing, I dare them to measure it as we have. So this is my theta healing right here measured. This is my theta harmonics at 4 hertz, extremely dominant. I even had to turn down the gain. And this is the raw EEG data right here from the rear brain. And here is the very visible, measurable theta wave right in the raw data. See that in red? It is so cool. So anyway, my theta here is golden mean ratio to the alpha. So theta frequency here is about 4.2 hertz. The alpha frequency here is about 8.5 hertz with the Schumann harmonics. Remember that? And so that harmonic series, golden mean, 4 harmonics and golden mean. So the ability to make golden mean harmonics here is indicated in blue and pink. And so you have the dominant harmonic cascade, because we found out that when brainwave harmonics are golden ratio between frequencies, as you see here, you have bliss, ecstasy, peak perception, plasma projection. Whereas when your brainwaves enter octave harmonic ratios, maximum destructive wave interference, you create a tetracubic lattice structure, which Nassim doesn't know is the opposite of fractal. And the tetracubic lattice of the octaves and golden ratio is perfect for telepathy. Now, later we're going to find out that the brainwaves of the Amasutam, which in Jedi Warriors is called the Empire, it's basically Darth Vader. They make much higher frequencies in their brainwaves called Tibetan gamma, which enable telepathy. And they have octave ratios to there, around 44 hertz. But because they have silicon-based nervous wiring, the Amasudan Draco, Uru, Anunnaki, they have faster wave propagation velocities in their nervous system, meaning higher frequencies in the brainwaves, meaning much more telepathy, as we know from the Draco firefight under Dulles per Phil Schneider, highly telepathic to Draco warriors. They did have two hearts, however, which we'll understand more about later. But they had almost no low frequencies in their brainwaves. And do you know what you lose when you don't get low frequencies in your brainwave? Hello, hello, hello. Are you with me on this? You lose empathy. Why? Because if you don't have long waves in your brainwaves, you can't feel big things. Is that simple? So long waves, which is long wave embedding in your brainwave power spectrum, enables compassion and empathy because you can feel large things outside you as if they're inside. If you don't make these long wave deep frequencies in your brainwaves, you don't get empathy because you can't embed, which in physics is called entanglement. So this is an introduction to how we're going to actually develop the virtual reality holodeck screen in the Jedi School.Science training laboratory at Disney World, because you're going to infiltrate them and tell them we need to save the world. We're going to use flameinmind.com. So these are some of the examples. These are 5 harmonics in golden ratio. This is the moment when I first found out that flameinmind.com was working, and I had so much bliss that and here you can again see this is the alpha and the theta. See this coherence in the raw data of the brain. It's so cool. Okay, so try flameinmind.com. It's not even expensive. So this is the transducer. This is the headset. It's built by Muse, and it transmits in Bluetooth very easily to iOS, meaning iPhone, iPad, particularly good on iPad and iPod. And soon we'll have adapters for regular Mac systems. So the other thing that Jedi warriors need to learn is the physics of empathy. And this is the other thing in the holodeck virtual reality training module at Jedi School.Science at Disney World we are installing because we need to save the world. and this is the physics of compassion. Remember, Enki, I mean Luke Skywalker, originally did the genetic engineering called MicroChloridians in the blood because this was the first time he had seen compassion. And the training for compassion is what enables to feel what's outside you as if it were inside you. And that's called recursive turning inside out-ness. And we're going to see how that's the physics of compassion and tornado steering, exactly in the way, for example, that the donuts, one inside the other, that cause your heart to fire electrically in the book When Time Breaks Down, The Origin of Cardiac Arrhythmia by Arthur T. Winfrey, was about that embed ability. So when your heart voltage compressing waves implode, it creates the physics of compassion because that harmonic inclusiveness you can see here in the power spectra of your EKG, which is defined as heart coherence, which I invented. Read about it at flameinmind.com. So here we're measuring heart coherence with my invention to measure internal cardiac coherence, something that HeartMath Institute totally screwed up. But flameinmind.com and iThrive.com, our 2 biofeedback inventions, walk circles around HeartMath Institute because of this right here. So here we're measuring internal phase coherence in 2 EKGs, my heart and my magic lady's heart. And I am in blue and she's in red. And when these 2 peaks here, the second order power spectrum of the cepstrum, when they line up, the amplitude of that peak, called internal heart coherence, indicates heart coherence, which is actually passion. And when the 2 peaks line up, it means my heart and her heart are musically in phase, called Tantra training, empathy, and Jedi Knight training. So read about heart coherence at flameinmind.com. So these are more examples from our literature. These are just other screens. There's many screens there. You'll see this story here. But the other thing that we can measure with that device is how to enable the force to be with you. So if you want the force to be with you, you need to do what I did here. We found the most magical tree we could find, which is a great way to attract the force. because the charge implosion's there. Remember, when Luke Skywalker went with Yoda, he went deep into nature. He left the metal buildings and the electrosmog and the bad air and the noise behind, and we went deep, 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 deep into nature. And there he was trained in May the Force be with you. And the physics, the reason for that is because of charge propagation efficiency, where the plasma can propagate efficiently, where natures and elementals and plasma bulbs and orbs and ghosts and plasma coherence and therify is possible. You know, we had a friend who tried to take an elemental. She was clairvoyant because he had take her elemental back into the city with her, and it couldn't survive there. It's because the charge dissipates. This says a lot about the science of ghosts, the science of plasma, the science of birth, the science of death. And we're going to talk more about that because we're going to see that death is actually an electrical black hole. So, in order to measure the place where it is possible to have the force be with you, at flameandmind.com, we have a life force measuring device, which is take the same brainwave headset measuring microvolts, a millionth of a volt, or nanovolts, and yes, microvolts. And you do a power spectrum of the microvolts, and you can tell which tree is resonating to the Schumann harmonics. So on the left here, this is the same device, flameandmind.com, the Muse headset, with our new technology, the software at flameandmind.com, for measuring life force. And we're measuring these harmonics here in a sacred tree, which is a great place for May the Force be with you. And look at those harmonics perfectly echoing the known published harmonics of the Schumann harmonic cascade right here, 7 hertz, 14 hertz, 20 hertz. So the Schumann harmonic cascades, the more of the Schumann harmonics, which we now know are phase conjugate implosive magnetic entropy, the more of those harmonics that you can pick up in a tree, the more there you can have the force be with you. It's called bioactivefield.com. So you can actually diagnose and measure whether a room is going to enable the force in your Jedi school training with our device. And here we're measuring that if we take the plasma system, therify.net, and propagate that plasma projective, Jedi, therify.net plasma, that when you measure afterwards, the amount of electrosmog remains reduced for considerable time, even after the plasma is turned off, because it's still imploding, which means negentropic and self-sorting. And the same technology enables us to predict where you can have your Jedi training and where you cannot. You cannot have Jedi training in an aluminum or steel building full of dead air and electrosmog because you cannot plasma project there. It is fundamental. And please help me tell Disney World about this, will you? So here we have, thanks to Juan Schlosser at bioarc.co right there, the bamboo structure showing beautiful harmonic inclusiveness, which actually allows us to measure and predict what building will cause a seed to grow. And here we have the actual seed growth trials here. We actually measured what capacitive structure. We have defined what living architecture is. So now you can tell your architecture university to throw away, burn down their library, and now know how to make a building that causes a seed to grow and therefore a child. Hello. What is living architecture? It's fundamental. It's charge implosive. It's measurable. So you need to decide that only architects that make buildings that cause seeds to grow get paychecks. And that is happening fast. So there's a reason why biological material makes living architecture. And if you want to make a Jedi school.science, if you want to make a Jedi Knight, it is essential. So these are the measurements of the capacitance in a beautiful bamboo, implosive, fractal, flower-like rose petal, very fractal structure. And you can predict in advance which building makes a seed grow and is therefore plasma projective and is therefore useful to Jedi Knights. Okay, so this is the known Schumann harmonics of this very happy tree. And this is the actual harmonic analysis available in Flame in Mind, where you compare the measured harmonics with the new known Schumann harmonics. It's very beautiful, sophisticated software. We need to thank Patrick Botti, our programmer, who will present more on the 5 biofeedback apps now in the Flame in Mind and iThrive.com suite here. And you can see all 5 apps at craniosacral-app.com or flameinmind.com or iThrive.com. We have 5 apps now. They're amazing. iThrive Chakras, iThrive Stress, Flame in Mind, Flame in Sound. It's beautiful. And the Flame in Sound is actually the bioactive harmonics to light the Flame in Mind. It's the perfect bliss-inducing binaural beat, all at flameinmind.com. So this is the geometry called optimized translation of vorticity. This is perfect implosion. We now know why this is the top-down view of DNA, hydrogen, and every living protein, because charge implosion is translating vorticity and accelerating charge out through the speed of light here at the Planck threshold into longitudinal, and that way out for charge through the speed of light at the Planck threshold is the reason gravity exists and all negentropic and centripetal forces. And this is my equation here in red, and these are the known frequencies of the spine liquid pump, which is the Jedi Brainstem just below the amygdala of the Anunnakin, of the Amasutum, the reptilian brainstem. So the sacrocranial harmonics here in green perfectly fit this equation. And right here, even not labeled, is the most important one of all, the 0.1 hertz Mayer wave, the most important frequency in the whole body, the most important frequency in your blood, 0.1 hertz, the most important frequency in the heart, the LF of the HRV. So there you go, the harmonics of your motor of Kundalini and bliss, the sacrocranial pump, are exactly phase conjugate negentropic charge implosive per my equation. And remember, if your spine liquid is pumping, it is then clinically impossible to be depressed. This is measurable in the HRV from the pulse analysis at iThrive.com, so you can teach the Jedi Knights to pump their spine liquid, which is how they become Jedi warriors, because that is plasma projection 101 in essence. So here, with the help of Patrick Botti of iThrive.com, he took my equation for Planck times power of golden ratio right here down the center. These are the harmonics predicted by my equation, named The Origin of Biologic Negentropy, the title of the book, my book, fractalfield.com. Take my equation for those harmonics, and you get these frequencies of the sacrocranial osteo, the known major harmonics of the important sacrocranial pump frequencies, the liquid harmonics of the spine, which must pump or you will be depressed. And it's all the physics of sacrocranial therapy, which is so famous in rebirthing and Kundalini and the Kundalini measurements, and predicts the major harmonics of the brainwave alpha, beta, delta, theta here, and predicts the Schumann harmonics here. That all falls directly out of my equation for the origin of biological negentropy. And I want to thank Patrick Botti for helping to graph that here. And so then also we took my equation here. These are the frequencies, again, 2.78, 4.57, 0.29, 11.8. So my equation predicted these frequencies. And it was when we learned that the famous Antoine Prairie used these frequencies to heal thousands of cancers with the Prairie plasma device in France. These are the frequencies he actually used. He got them from Minkowski and Tesla and Rife. He used 3 hertz, 10 hertz, 32 hertz, and 80 hertz. And look, bang, 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 almost right onto my equation. So when we saw that in the literature, saw that it fit my new equation. Remember, the French government, after documenting that Antoine Prairie had healed thousands of cancers, gave up on the technology because no one knew how it worked until me. I wrote the equation to predict the physics behind it, which is called phase conjugation, which Antoine Prairie did not know. And so we optimized and perfected and built Therify.net, and we're now in 20 countries producing negentropy, implosion, self-organization in cold plasma, which is famous for healing. Remember, Therify.net is a non-hazardous device when used according to instructions. And of course, there's a disclaimer there. We make no medical claims. And eventually, of course, we'll have FDA trials, but that takes a long time. But meantime, we're very good at pain reduction and many things like circulation. Because remember, optimized charge circulation is optimized blood circulation. And charge circulation is, by definition, what perfect plasma implosion is. So this is what the plasma tubes look like at Therify.net. This is the amplifier, and we've talked about it many times. Most of you know the story. You can read all about it at therapy.net. So rejuvenation is actually negentropy. That's the point. And that's what the ancients said when they said, I will raise a Shem unto the Lord. This was the Shem, just like the Djed stone. It is a plasma projector, which is a plasma imploder, which is the definition of being a Jedi Knight. And this is the plasma imploding. So as we were joking here, we apologize if the Medical Association did not know what their logo was for. The caduceus is actually a graph of phase conjugation. This is the Planck threshold, and this is the path of charge between the two plasma tubes of the therapy called phase conjugation. So in fact, the Medical Association has the right logo. All we need to do is teach them the physics of what their logo is for, and then they'll know what rejuvenation is. It's kind of funny, isn't it? Yeah, actually, yes, that's right, Jillian. She's saying if you listen to music with a lot of 50 hertz, it can be cancer preventing. That's right, because 50 hertz amazingly fits beautifully into my equation. 60 does not. And later we'll see in the dozens of studies of cancer emitting frequencies, 50 hertz was wonderful. So this is just talking about the same device, the same harmonic series, also produce optimum seed growth. That the seed growth, plant growth, is dramatically stimulated by the same bioactive field of the living plasma projection of therapy.net. And this is why and how. And we get dramatic seed germination growth acceleration with our therapy plasma, as did Antoine Prairie. And now we understand exactly why. And yes, Jillian, it's beautiful that you mentioned that about 50 hertz. So yes, she said, if you listen to a lot of music, 50 hertz, it could be for cancer prevention. So here's about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 detailed medical studies showing what frequencies most help eliminate cancer. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of those studies showed that 50 hertz was the best frequency to reduce cancer. And then some of them showed the other frequencies, 20, and then a bunch of 7.5 hertz, and then 0.5 hertz. And look, each of those studies points exactly, virtually exactly, to the frequencies predicted by my equation, which is down here on the left. And that study, you can read that whole study about the best study of all the frequencies in the world, best known for healing cancer. And the vast majority of them hit bang on to my equation for reasons which are now apparent, because phase conjugate negentropy is the opposite of centrifugal force. It is centripetal force, which is by definition the opposite of cancer. So most of you have seen the equation at fractalfield.com. This is what's going to be on my starship here. It's Planck times Golden ratio, and you multiply Planck times Golden ratio, you get exactly 3 radii of hydrogen. You get the most important molecule in the body, ADP, ATP. You get the exact only 2 frequencies to make photosynthesis happen. You get almost exactly the British foot. You get the Schumann harmonics, the brainwave harmonics. You get the LF of the Mayer wave of the blood. You get the Venus year, Earth year, precessional year, and galactic year, almost exactly by using my equation. It's called origin of biological negentropy. So wave functions which fit this line are charge implosive and therefore negentropic. And that defines biology. Photosynthesis started there. This is the actual graph of the top-down view of hydrogen based on that. So these are my equation for the actual radii of hydrogen. So now we're going to actually switch slideshows here. We have 2C show. 1 moment. Yeah. So this is the frequencies of photosynthesis. Notice that the green prevents photosynthesis, whereas this purple and this orange frequency of light, wavelength, is a very narrow notch of creating maximum photosynthesis. And those frequencies are exactly my equation, Planck times Golden ratio of 136 and 137 power. And we now know why, because photosynthesis is phase conjugate implosive charge, going exactly tuned to Planck. And this is more about the physics of color, which we'll discuss another time. But basically, the yellow and blue phase angle of torus photon are exactly the dodeca phase angle, 63, 117 degrees, proving that the reason rainbows exist is golden ratio phase conjugation. Very cool. Now, this is a slide we want to spend just a little more time with. This is how you create the longitudinal waves, which are the physics of actual may the force be with you. Whether you're designing a graveyard a burial ground, a labyrinth, a Gothic cathedral, a cozy rev mirror, or a therapy emplacement, or a pyramid, all of those need to be located where magnetic lines cross. Because where magnetic lines cross, remember the four-wave mixing, creates conjugation, and that embeds the longitudinal waves. And longitudinal waves, called scalar or torsional sometimes, or circularly polarized, longitudinal waves go faster than the speed of light, enabling action at a distance. And action at a distance for wave mechanics, which Einstein incorrectly always called spooky, is actually longitudinal interferometry through the speed of light, something Einstein did not understand at all, which is sad because it's a real barrier for physics to understand life force and spiritual phenomena. So if you would like to understand spiritual physics, called Jedi School.Science, you need to understand how longitudinal waves work. So here's the graph, here's the picture. So what happens is, and many of you have heard this story before, that almost all our present conventional communications technology, which is not how Jedi warriors communicate by telepathy. Conventional radio technologies use the transverse component of electromagnetic fields, which is the wave going up and down here. Whereas longitudinal waves is a compressional wave here. And remember, when the wave goes from transverse to longitudinal, that's also how tsunamis work, so listen carefully. So what happens is, if the transverse wave going up and down here, like this, enters this spiral on a cone called the caduceus of Hermes, called phase conjugation, the wave is translated in that vorticity, and it converts the up and down motion in perfect, non-destructive, constructive, optimized translation of vorticity. Remember how golden spiral is defined in hydrodynamics physics. And it comes out right here at the Planck threshold, having been accelerated through the speed of light by golden mean ratio multiples times c, the speed of light, which is what Professor Raymond Chow measured. The faster than light velocities generally are between 1.5 and 1.7 times c, the speed of light, by measurement, Professor Raymond Chow, which confirms my theory of gravity, 1.618 times the speed of light, because golden ratio phase conjugation is how you produce longitudinal waves, which are gravity waves. Hello? And they're faster than light, and they enable action at a distance. And you need to understand how, because otherwise you don't understand how to be a Jedi Knight. Because action at a distance is longitudinal interferometry, for example, non-destructive plasma containment, otherwise known as flameinmind.com. How Ingo Swann lit that thermistor at a distance with his mind. So when the wave gets compressed down exactly the Planck threshold, and remember, my equation proves this is how hydrogen works. This is how hydrogen makes gravity. This is why objects fall to the ground, because the waves add and multiply constructively, not just their wavelength at the golden mean cross point nodes. They add and multiply recursively, constructively, called conjugation, their phase velocities. And when you turn compression of charge into acceleration of charge, remember, adding and multiplying constructively a phase velocity recursively by conjugation, that acceleration of charge is the only definition of the gravity. Remember, Einstein proved that no experiment could differentiate acceleration from gravity because gravity is charge acceleration. Remember, we said charge, which is the force, is everything. So if you learn how to accelerate charge, you know how to make gravity. So now, since I proved this is how the radii of hydrogen built, you now know how hydrogen is making gravity, because it's accelerated charge out through the exhaust port called Planck, waves going through the speed of light called longitudinal EMF, which are gravity waves. And if you could measure longitudinal waves, you can measure gravity waves. Hello. And longitudinal waves are the essence of geobiology. And longitudinal waves embedding is how you predict why Earth magnetic line cross points not only create telepathy, but Earth magnetic lines cross points dramatically affect nuclear critical mass for nuclear reactions. Kathy proved it. And the reason is because these longitudinal waves reach directly into the nucleus, and the symmetry of their approach two-center called four-wave mixing enables the charge implosion, which was the name and definition of the planet's first nuclear device, charge implosion. And what's the geometry of the progression of those photon waves of charge implosion? Dodecahedral, and even the planet's first nuclear explosion device. So obviously, if the magnetic line crosspoints, when they embed longitudinal waves, create telepathy and nuclear critical mass and longitudinal fast and light embedding and flame in mind. So the short summary of that story, that Maury, is as the Cozy Rev mirror people proved from Russia, which Korotkov measured dozens of times, that if you want military quality telepathy thousands of miles apart, it's been measured many times, Cozy Rev mirror, you take these metal cylinders, which are microwave tuned, and you place them at the magnetic line cross points and measure those Earth magnetic line cross points in nanoteslas. And if they cross, the same way you decide where to put a labyrinth, a Gothic cathedral, a therapy, a plasma, birth and death, a graveyard. Remember, death is a black hole that's successful. We're going to define the physics in a minute. So all of those phenomena, and where Agnihotra works best and where therapy works best, it's all about these magnetic line cross points. We know that the pyramids are all there. Why? Because you get longitudinal embedding, and that's DNA radio, that's galactic radio, that's gravity wave radio, that's gravity wave. So it's all about longitudinal embedding. So if you don't understand that, you haven't started to understand Hermetic physics. And this is Jedi School Science 101. That's right. This is Thoth helping us tune the grid. Remember, Tehute was later called DWD, which is the line of David, which is Thothmosis, which is the name of the Royal Egyptian line of kings. So this is Hermetic Science 101. We have just hermetically sealed the secret. So this is what the Egyptians meant by the Ba emerging from the Ka, Merkaba, and the Kaba stone. The Ka is the amount of phase coherence in your conventional aura, which they called in Egypt correctly your boat into the underworld. So the Ka is the amount of coherence in your aura, which is basically a transverse electromagnetic wave. It's a cloud of charge, cold plasma, your aura, that you can take as a boat. And the more you cohere that aura, which is to say, the only definition of success in life actually is get a big aura. And if you are totally unselfish, your aura grows because the force recognizes pure intention. And pure intention is measurable as heart coherence. So it is not selfish to want a big aura. In fact, getting a big aura is proof that you are unselfish. Isn't that so cool? So what the Egyptians meant by your Ba was the coherence of your aura, your boat into the underworld. Now, the moment that the geometry of your attention, remember, attention is the physics that happens when the charge waves implode and conjugate between the hemispheres of your brain. When the plasma conjugates at the Planck threshold in your brain, it creates what's called perception. So to be able to track a wave that goes through the speed of light, called the Ba emerging from the Ka, which is essential if you are to lucid dream, if you are to survive death, if you are to star navigate, if you are to astral travel, if you are to plasma project, which is the only definition of being a Jedi Knight. So hello, let's do the brainwave and heartwave work to cohere that aura, because we know for sure that if you want to take memory through death, or if you want to be a Jedi Knight, you must be able to lucid dream. And how do you do it? You refine the quality of your attention such that the wave propagating from the imploding center of your aura, converting between the transverse to the longitudinal compressional faster than light propagation, which then propagates into an array which needs to look like a rose, which is to say phase conjugate, which is why Stonehenge is a great place to lucid dream, and a metal, steel, and aluminum building with dead air and electroshock is a horrible place to lucid dream. The reason is because you need that array to propagate the longitudinal coherent electromagnetic, which is called the Ba from the Ka. So when the quality of the attention in your aura is refined to the point where you can track the wavefront of that phase velocity going in that propagating rose fractal longitudinal propagation dodecaconstellation. Remember, first make a magnetic map of your bed, then make a magnetic map of your house, then make a magnetic map of your village, then make a magnetic map of your city, and rearrange them all to look like a rose, and then you're done. The original magnetic map of Prague is a rose, and that's one of the first places I discovered I could do better lucid dreaming, actually. So, as we conclude at the bottom of the slide, so Einstein's fatal mistake is not only is it possible to go through the speed of light, it is fatal not to. Because as we're going to see in the physics of successful death, and I think we may move on to those slides here shortly. The reason the death visions, as Ray Moody very accurately showed by measurement and by getting documented reports from dozens of surgeons and medical professionals, the death visions are electrically contagious. I repeat, the death visions are well documented medically to be electrically contagious, and you, Jedi Knights, need to know why. And that reason is because successful death is a black hole that implodes your charge through the speed of light into the longitudinal, which is charge distribution efficiency from longitudinal interferometry, which is the Ba from the Ka, which is the physics, the only possible physics, longitudinal interferometry of collective mind, the communion of saints, the collective unconscious, the Akashic Records, a beautiful record company I visited outside of Boulder. It's called Akashic Records. No, I mean, this is longitudinal interferometry. This is how it works, and we need to understand that. So let's see if we can just move along here. We'll get to those slides. So this is called phi recursion-induced charge acceleration implosion solution. This is the same picture. We've been discussing these pictures. So see here, if you take my equation for golden ratio times Planck, you get exactly the British foot. Isn't that cool? Which is then the Raymond, the Royal Cubic, Palestinian, Roman megalith yard, virtually one British yard. And actually, we later learned you get the Mayan measure. The point is that sacred dimension is only a name for permissive charge collapse. Do you see? The only reason for studying sacred dimension is to learn about how charge collapse implosion becomes permissive, non-destructive, and negentropic through Planck. And that is the definition of sacred architecture and sacred dimension. That's the point. So this is about magnetic phase conjugation. These are the harmonics that Elizabeth Rauscher proved in her FDA trials reduce pain. And these are the harmonics that my equation proved are phase conjugate. So when I showed Elizabeth Rauscher this, she agreed that I had therefore invented phase conjugate magnetics, which we then applied directly in the bifiller Tesla coil at theraphi.net. So that's why, because you make magnetic harmonics implode, and of course, you reduce pain. Yeah, so this is just the same slide. So these are the frequencies from my equation. These are the frequencies from my equation, which also show up as peaks in Elizabeth Rauscher's chart of her FDA trials on what magnetic harmonics reduce pain. And reducing pain is one of the first things we seem to have hundreds of reports of success with theraphi.net. Localized pain we can often help in just 1 or 2 sessions. Long-term chronic pain in many cases, but not all, we can help, but it takes more sessions. And this is about the Deus Mana machine that we think the Mana machine was actually what the Ark of the Covenant was. It was a pump device for producing the microbes that made the gold powder. And gold powder production is part of what Jedi school scientists need to learn about. It was called the spice. Oops, are we mixing metaphors here? This is about phase conjugation. We talked about this slide before with mixing. So we have applied that precise spiral on the cone to implosion in water called Schauberger's Dream in the vortex nozzle of the super imploder from theimploder.com. And we're successful in many countries around the world with implosion technologies for water. We produce charge acceleration, charged water, and solubility increase dramatic. It's wonderful for plants and people. Solubility, hydration are the issue for not just plants, but people. And it also produces healing water in a spa. Very successful technology, theimploder.com. Here's charge implosion icosify from purify.com. This is capacitance made implosively. And this is charge implosion in defining sacred architecture. This is actually what is called sacred space. At this point, you could measure not just archaeoacoustic implosion, but you can measure capacitive implosion. So this is what Castaneda meant by finding the power point in the room. So biologic architecture actually uses all these principles. And this is the stupa, which is a Jedi concept for a living capacitor. It's actually charge implosion. So get the steel and aluminum out here, kids, when you build a new one. And so this is the chart. Basically, high dielectric constant is on top, at least here, not in the metals. But in low dielectric constant is on the bottom. So material for living architecture is based on fractality of structure. Fractality of structure is correlated to dielectric constant. For example, all living material rearrange the molecules to be more fractal. And that's why living materials make ideal high dielectric capacitors and therefore ideal architecture, because it makes capacitors ring like a bell, and that creates the perfect echo for capacitance, which defines the hero in the Sufi movie. Perfect echo is the only definition of immortality, and the perfect echo is a high dielectric capacitor. So this is the example, and real fractal architecture here. This is a hospital in France, which unfortunately was the most nauseating place I've ever been in my life. And they call it a hospital, but actually it's making death so that's why hospitals in general are the worst place for birth and death, because they don't understand fractal architecture. This is Ron Eglash, fractal architecture. This is how you measure life force in architecture, by capacitive charge distribution efficiency. This is the capacitance in a living sacred space. This was a living building. This is the capacitance this is measured by the GDV now, in a metal building. You see how dead it is. The charge cannot breathe. This is that donuts turning inside out of the heart within heart we talked about, which defines compassion and love, etc. So I'm going to move now onward to graphic series number 4 here, because we're going to run out of time and we want to do some questions. So we want to just talk about that business about successful death. So we need slide number 18 here. You hold right here, and then you scroll. Slide number 18. One moment. Yes. Bear with me just one moment here. There we go. So this is what we want to talk about. So when you explain to the administration at Disney World that they will save the world if they install Jedi School.Science in the new holodeck at the new Star Wars Pavilion at Disney World, when you explain to them how they will be saving the world, this is part of it, okay? So if we train enough Jedi Knights to implode plasma project charge, remember, a Jed is a plasma projector. This phenomenon right here happens. This has been measured 11 different times. This is from, let's see, the magazine here is published at Whale Dreamers. What this is a graph of the number of solar flares over in the days before and after a global meditation event. And the global meditation event essentially is teaching more than 1 million children to sing the same song at the same time. And when you do that, and that happened right here, here's what happened to the number of solar flares. The solar flares went down. The sun imploded. The sun became more centripetal. So this is the average of 11 different events where more than 1 million children prayed and sang together. And this is one particular event. This is a day of a peace meditation, and this is what happened to the solar flares when millions of people prayed together. So We know for sure, having been measured quite a few times, that the sun becomes centripetal, literally peaceful, reduced solar flares is dramatic at the moment when large number of Jedi Knights, I mean children, learn to implode, charge, or plasma project together. So we know many things from this. We know that stars need what collective consciousness produces, which is centripetal force, which we now know stabilizes gravity and therefore star birth. So in effect, when we said Anu as in Anunnaki, as in the Knights of the Star Birth, Anu meaning sun god. Sun gods are those who are able to project their aura or plasma, the Jed eye, the eye from the Jed, through the heart of the sun. This is called a solar heart community at yahoogroups.com that we started about the shaman that are going through the heart of the sun. And they all are clear. They experience the heart of the sun as cool and inviting and not hot at all. And they experience it as an eyeball. So when your aura gets really big and you can plasma project into the heart of the sun, which is actually the only way in and out of here, and thus the only way out of kindergarten, which is really what Jedi Knights must do. So this centripetal force that humans make are actually the service that consciousness renders among stars. So when Kurt Vonnegut asked the correct question in the book Breakfast of Champions, Drinking Whiskey at Breakfast Time, he did ask the correct question, which is, what are people for? And now we have an answer. We make a centripetal force which stable star birth requires. And you think this is trivial at first, but you realize when you see how Bentoff, my teacher, during his Kundalini stabilized the earth and then was able to see through the stars, your aura gets big enough when you are a real Jedi Knight to become massively centripetal and steer things like solar flares. We've explained in detail the physics of how humans steer tornadoes, goldenmean.info/dowsing. And we didn't have time for the graph of the tornado steering part here. But the centripetal force that when you turn inside out and you feel the tornado's plasma body outside as if it's inside you, and then you feel the pain of the tornado called eating the hoocha. What happens is you become the creator of the center of lowest pressure, which is the charge implosion in your own hearts. And if you were clairvoyant and you watched a shaman steering a tornado, as the shaman is feeling the body of the tornado as if it's its own and feeling the pain of its tornado, remember that pain, as in the definition of all pain, is only where charge bleeds due to lack of fractal compression. So you restore fractality, you restore compression and centripetal force, which is the opposite of pain electrically, which is the principle behind pain reduction in magnetic phase conjugation and therapy.net. Therefore, the reason the tornado goes out of its way to destroy metal buildings is because they feel like pain to that tornado because its capacitive imploding body bleeds charge where the environment is not fractal. Whereas a tornado will never destroy a sacred stone temple, not just because it's heavy, but because the electric field there is implosive, and therefore it feels like part of the body of the tornado. So the tornado will not kill a sacred site because the sacred site does not cause the tornado pain. Do you get it? So when the shaman says, oh, I'm feeling the pain of the tornado, what actually it's feeling is it's feeling where it's bleeding charge. And when the shaman feels the pain of the tornado better than the tornado feels its own pain, then the tornado says, oh, I think I'm going to follow you. And that's as true as for solar flares as it is for tornadoes. Lots of meditation groups have steered tornadoes. There's lots of reports. Read some of them. The group in Western Canada was steering tornadoes years ago. It's very common. And I think it's time we learned how. Tornadoes just mean that the elementals are angry, and they damn well should be angry because we've been ignoring them. The elementals and the undines and the the gnomes, they consider humans drunk because we don't talk to them. And the reason we don't talk to them is because we don't believe in living plasma. And the reason we don't believe in living plasma is because we don't know how charge becomes self-aware. And when it conjugate implodes, it becomes self-aware, and it connects at center by phase conjugation to longitudinal wave, which is DNA radio, which connects sentience. So when the mystic says that sentience is everywhere, we can actually be far more specific than that. There is more sentience in a sacred forest where charge is imploding and plasma is self-aware and orbs and the force is with you. But in metal buildings, aluminum, steel, in a city with bad air and electrosmog, no. There is much, much, much less sentience. There is less self-awareness. And the force is, it's very much harder for the force to be with you. You know how I found that out one time? I do lectures on sacred geometry. I've been doing it for 30 years. And, when you do a lecture in a metal building, most buildings have metal in it. But on the few occasions when I actually did these lectures in nature, one time we were in South France at Tremordi, and we went out in the field and we did a labyrinth with people. And that evening, within hours, the biggest storm in a decade hit right there. I mean, the elementals, they just came right into the other time, I think it was in Sedona, and we were doing the lecture, but we were in a tent outdoors in nature. And I started this lecture, I started carrying on Kundalini, and that was this huge rainstorm, man. So the thing is, it's obvious that if you want the force to be with you, you need to know what allows the force to propagate. And that is what a fractalfield.com is. It is charge distribution efficiency. So this is Korotkov measuring what a ghost looks like. Most of you have seen these slides before. This is the number of hours after death in which your aura takes to leave your body. It's measurable if you have a peaceful death, which is very important. So 10 and 36 hours after death by measurement is when your aura leaves your body, which is the ba from the ka. And if you've done your homework and you've learned to lucid dream, So successful death is measurable. It's a charged plasma field. It is the Djed, be with you. This is the book Light After Life by our friend, Dr. Korotkov. So this is what's happening. Your aura is imploding. And this is why the death visions, the Djed, that plasma projection, is a black hole, which makes the death visions electrically contagious. Very important to understand. So this is from Alex Gray's picture of the plasma at death going into the pine cone, the pineapple pining away from the pineal. So what we saw, and we've heard me talk about this many, this is all from goldenmean.info/immortality. You can see all these pictures. So when large numbers of near-death experiences are asked, what did you see? They all said, I saw a lattice, and I saw a cobweb, then I saw a tunnel, then I saw a spiral. Then that repeats, and this is the map to the visions of successful death. And this science work was done by Heinrich Kluwe. This is called the Kluwe form constants. And the reason you see a lattice, a cobweb, and a tunnel, a spiral is because this is what the aura around your blood, your DNA, is doing to implode and reach the Planck threshold and become longitudinal, the ba from the ka. And if you don't implode and plasma project, which is the definition of being a Jedi Knight, you do not get successful death, successful lucid dreaming, successful astral projection, successful remote viewing, etc., etc. So the lattice, cobweb, tunnel, spiral is actually a map to DNA recursive braid implosion, which is creating charge acceleration called raising the Djed of the Jedi. And so that map to imploding in DNA is a map to what you see when you die for a very, very important reason. Plasma projection, raising the Djed. So this is what's called Osiris's hat. And later, and it was very clear in Egypt, that Osiris's hat is how you navigate in the underworld. It was only years later that we learned the Osiris's hat is the shape of the pericardium, the muscle cavity containing the human heart. Why is that critical for surviving death? The real plasma project. The reason is because when you evolve the muscles to choose emotion, which is the harmonics of your EKG called heart coherence, which I invented, the measurement. So when you're able to consciously choose how to shape the muscle cavity around the heart, you focus the heart harmonics, shown on top here, in exactly the same way that the ability to control the shape of your eyeball with the muscles around your eye determine your ability to focus. So if you didn't evolve the muscles around your eyeball to massage the envelope, I mean control the shape of the eyeball, you would never focus your eye. Well, the ability to learn coherent emotion, which is the muscles that control the pericardium, which is the hat of Osiris, determine your ability to fire your heart implosion, coherent emotion. Remember the motion, harmonics, ascentic work, the shape of the muscle pressure over time of the wave shape, the way you play a violin string to say, I love you, creates a pressure wave which reaches a maximum at golden mean ratio into the duration of that event. goldenmean.info/touch, the centric work. So we know exactly the wave shape of emotion, and love, lo-fi, is a golden mean ratio wave shape for a very, very particular reason. It creates implosive embedding. So, long wave phi ratio, lo-fi, I love you. So, once you've learned coherent emotion, the ability to control the muscles of your pericardium, your hat of Osiris, you have learned to project your heart harmonics, which is the plasma of the most powerful voltage in the body. EKG is orders of magnitude more powerful. It's millivolts, not microvolts of the EEG. So coherent emotion ultimately uses your heart energy to plasma project at the moment of death. And at the moment of death, if you're holding in your heart a perfectly shareable wave called fractal, conjugate interferometry longitudinal, then you have the property of charge distribution efficiency called the perfect echo, which defines the permission to enter the collective unconscious, what the Aboriginals will call ancestral memory, which every Aboriginal tribe is absolutely clear is the purpose of life is ancestral memory. And there's a reason for that, because it's the maximum survival information library, which is accessed through the conjugate interferometry longitudinal fractal grid called Songline Dreaming Track. So the ability to embed your aura into the larger electric field, the collective unconscious community of saints, depends on entering a successful black hole at the moment of death, which, by the way, is the same for successful birth, and it's the physics of successful rebirthing. You know, the birth canal is actually shaped like a golden ratio, harmonic cascade, pressure maximum at the moment of birth. So this was our introduction to Jedi School Science. This is just an introduction. The new Jedi School Science manual, my newest book, is due to be released maybe a month or so at www.jedischool.science, which will be a manual for the new Jedi School Science, which you are going to help me install at Disney World so we can save the world, because we are going to have enough Jedi Knights to steer the solar wind and steer tornadoes. And just another little side note here. This is our little introduction to galactic history now. Remember we said Gene Roddenberry studied Orion history with Phyllis Schlemmer in The Only Planet of Choice, which is also where a guy named Alex Collier and the Andromedan material learned Orion history, which later became the movie Star Wars. Oh, that's what we're talking about. Right. So there's a little piece of that galactic history we need to learn, which has to do with the lineage of a family called Anunnakin. No, Anakin. No, Anunnaki. Oh, right. Right. who woke up to find out that his grandfather, was half machine, Darth Vader. Well, there's this guy called Enki, otherwise known as Luke. And Enki wound up to find out his father was half machine. And there's this guy in Dune called who woke up to find that his father was half machine. Well, if you want to understand why your father was half machine, I think you should read Anton Parks. Now, Anton Parks writes about galactic history, and he writes about two main groups. And one is called the Galactic Federation. Does that sound familiar from Star Wars? And part of the Galactic Federation was the Andromedans. And they were in opposition to another group called the Empire Strikes Back, which is in Anton Parks called the Amygdala. Now, one of the things they did in this story, and I suggest you read Anton Parks at antonparks.com or fractalfield.com/Zeitlin, Zeitlin, Jerry Zeitlin. And so Anton Parks, there's many pieces of that story, but one piece of the story helps you understand how we're going to save the world when you help me install the new Jedi School.Science holodeck at Disney World. When you convince the administration there, that's how we're going to save the world. Because the Amasutum, which is Draco Uru Anunnaki, installed something clear here called the Death Star. Does that sound familiar? Luke Skywalker? Okay, so the Death Star is actually our moon, which is hollow and metal, as proven, because when the other half of the lunar lander crashed back down, the damn thing rang like a bell for many hours. It's hollow and metal. It's very well proven. And the reason it's hollow and metal is because it's the Death Star. Well, actually, the Andromedans offered to tow it out of here, but we realized that would be a mistake because our orbit would destabilize. However, we have had an update from the Andromedans thanks to the mediator here at Bucharest, and we will reveal who that is later, who has told us, she confirmed what Alex Collier reported in the Andromeda Papers, and said that the Galactic Federation joined the Andromedans and kicked out the reptilians infesting the heart of the moon. It's actually a real story. It's true. Remember, when the same guy, Ingo Swann, who remember he did he traveled the backside of the moon very famously in his very famous book, Penetration, The Question of Extraterrestrial and Human Telepathy by Ingo Swann. And he showed that traveling the backside of the moon was very, very scary because the bad guys lived there. Moon and Mars were taken over by the Dracos. Not quite such a good idea, Elon Musk. Oops. The bad guys lived there. Why? Well, because they were opposite to Fractal and opposite to Conjugate. Well, it turns out that the Galactic Federation was successful in installing a net, which was actually a quarantine with these charge propagation devices around the moon, which was designed to keep the Draco Anunnaki Amasutum trapped here where they did the genetic intervention. Unfortunately, they hacked their way in, interfered with the interferometry, and many of them escaped. However, as we were told by Thoth, we need no longer be spawn of the Nephilim. Look, the Draco Anunnaki, they created the humans, the Adama, to be slaves and snack food. Well, it's a bit insulting to our ancestors, but the other side of that coin was we could be the vaccine in the Orion Wars called Star Wars. And the way we can be the vaccine for the Orion Wars is we can become Jedi Knights, because when we become plasma projective, we become what they needed and could not have. And this is the point. You see, the Draco Anunnaki Amasutum, they breathed in nitrogen and breathed out cyanogen. They had a lipid oil-based blood, which is perfectly nourished by French fries and Coca-Cola at McDonald's. And so they were poisoned by oxygen and poisoned by water. Water and oxygen are a poison to the Draco. It's actually true, which is why you could get them out of your Senate and Parliament by simply pumping in oxygen. Isn't that cool? But anyway, On their home star, radioactivity was a metabolic accelerant, as is the Paul Brown nuclear battery, because it generates electron nuclear cascades. So a low-level radioactivity was native to them in their home star Alpha Draconis and later in Pleiades. So you can tell what planets the Draco Amasutum Empire Strikes Back are winning, because on those planets, moisture goes down, deserts go up, oxygen goes down, and radioactivity goes up. So you make a graph of radioactivity up and oxygen down, and you see which planets the Dracos are winning. Oops, that sounds like Earth. How are we going to fix it? Oh, we need to install Jedi School.Science holodeck at the new Walt Disney Star Wars Emporium at Disney World, and you're going to help me do it. You see how we fix this problem? And that's the happily ever after. So, thank you very much. Have a great night. See you at Jedi School.Science. Bye-bye.